brings beauty and efficiency to the modern kitchen, and new electric appliances add to its convenience. On the new circular electric stove is a glass tea kettle. You can see when it needs filling, it is easy to keep clean, and boiling water will not crack it.
What you guys are seeing right now is footage from the 1940s and 1950s. This video shows how people from the 1940s and 50s thought the kitchen would look like in the future. It includes inventions such as automatic dog feeder and also automatic toaster. But as you can see, these kind of inventions didn't actually quite happen. This is retrofuturism. Retrofuture, or better known as retrofuturism, is a term for a movement and an art form for describing the effects of the past era on the future. It is characteristic for retrofuturism to mix old and retro style with futuristic technology. Basically, what this means that this kind of art describes the old imaginary world that we might have in the future. Also, did you know that Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that is based around retrofuturism, but we'll talk about later in the video. History is a very big part of retrofuturism, so we're gonna continue with that. So before I talk about the history of retrofuturism, I want to talk about what was before retrofuturism. Before retrofuturism, there was an art movement called futurism. It was a movement which originated from Italy, but was also in Russia, I think, and it was active during the beginning of the 1900s. It was also a social movement which glamorized things like future, technology, and energy. You might be asking, how does futurism relate to retrofuturism? The answer is that the people who create retrofuturistic art take inspiration from futurism and brought a retro touch to it. And shortly said, the retrofuturism artists created art of futurism with technology that never existed. Now, let's get back to full-on retrofuturism. Retrofuturism is actually quite old form of art and movement. Its roots go way back to 19th and 20th centuries, and as the authors Elizabeth Coffey and Kate C. LeMay in the book called The Oxford Handbook to Science Fiction would say, in quotation marks, an early optimism that focused on the past and was rooted in the 19th century and early 20th century golden age that continued long into the 1960s space age. This form of art style came into pop culture during the 1960s and 70s and inspired, for example, George Lucas for his Star Wars movie series. As the name retrofuturism tells, in retrofuturism, there's going to be retro and futuristic type of characteristics in the art movement. The combination of retro and futurism can lead to intriguing artwork and art in general. Many illustrators have described retrofuturism to have vintage and retro design aspects, but also to have many futuristic type of design aspects. It can also be seen as abstract, but also vibrant, since in the artwork many artists use light and optimistical colors and bringing a hopeful atmosphere. But the main thing the artists of retrofuturistic artwork want to give the consumer of art is nostalgia. These retro type of paintings and other artwork are thought to give the feeling of future that could have happened but never did. But also many characteristics have retrofuturism's changes, so let's jump into those. So few who click this video probably have heard some of these words or genres before, but do you actually know what they mean? Let's start with the most known ones. The most well-known and the most popular category of retrofuturism in the market is called cyberpunk. If you're somehow interested in retrofuturism in some way, you might have heard the game Cyberpunk 2077 before. Cyberpunk is most known from its neon lights and high-technology cars below massive skyscrapers and other buildings. This genre started to come into fashion during the 1980s, that you can see from the leather jackets and computer technology. The weird thing is, some people do not consider cyberpunk part of retrofuturism, but I will not be discussing about it during this video because this video will become very challenging to follow. But I will be leaving a couple links down in the description where you can read in depth this topic. Although cyberpunk is very dominant in the retrofuturistic industry, there are also many other interesting genres of retrofuturism out there. A good example for this is called steampunk. Steampunk is a subgenre of retrofuturism that combines steam and steam engines with retrofuturistic technologies. The era is inspired by the era known as Victorian era, which was a timeline of Queen Victoria's reign in the 19th century. The genre features clockwork, engines, and, for example, laboratory equipment with futuristic design concepts such as robot arms and robots in general. Also many other genres, subgenres, and other genres of art that somehow relate to retrofuturism, like atom punk, diesel punk, vaporwave, nostalgia core, K-bug, synthwave, Reagan. But let's not talk about them anymore because then this video is going to be like 2 hours long, so let's move on.
Welcome to the Video Game Zone. In this zone you'll be hearing about the best games that feature retrofuturism. So let's get straight into it. These example games include games like Fallout 4, Alien Isolation, Grand Theft Auto 2, the Wolfenstein games, which are my personal favorite games, and of course the newest addition to these games, Cyberpunk 2077. Thank you guys for listening to this part, and let's go to the next and final scene of this whole video.
Alright, back to normal. In this section, I'll be listing the most important points of retrofuturism quite quickly. So, in a conclusion, retrofuturism is an art form which describes what people in the past would think the future would look like. And retrofuturism started back in the 19th century, and it's very vibrant and very retro-ish. There are many genres of retrofuturism, but the most popular ones are cyberpunk and steampunk. Also, many video games feature retrofuturism, such as Cyberpunk 2077 and Wolfenstein games. And that's it. Also, put down in the comments how many times you think I said retrofuturism. And like, sub, comment, and see you guys later.
Hey, yo, look who fell asleep first. Prank him, John. You already know. Yo!